There's a lot of people who talk, and they could talk, and they could talk, and they could talk, but they hardly take any action that's congruent with what they talk. How can someone walk their talk like a peak performer?
Ooh. How can someone walk their talk like a peak performer? Ooh, that's a good one. Well, you know, I think it really comes down to the rituals in your life. Here's the thing with that. First of all, you have to know where you're going, right? You have to know where you are and you have to know where you're going. How do you identify yourself, right? Because most people identify themselves in some way. Most of the time it's in the negative, right? Most people are living life in the negative. So their identity is rooted in some kind of subtraction type of mentality, meaning that it's always in lack, right? They're always looking at like what can they remove from their life in order to kind of make it easier, but they always create a void. They don't replace it with an upgraded behavior. So it's a feedback loop, it's a feedback behavior that keeps happening. They keep repeating the same patterns over and over. They can never really get ahead in life. So you have to change your identity, right? Tony Robbins always says that whatever your standards are in life, you're going to meet those standards. So if your standards are a certain financial number every single month, you will do whatever it takes. Your paradigm, your psychology, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, is always going to meet you right there where you believe you are. But if you can start to create an identity that is far more similar to a peak performer's, you're going to start moving in that direction. So the first thing is you have to reframe your psychology. You have to work on the interior decorating of your psychological state. But also while you're doing that, you don't just do that in a lotus position sitting down meditating. That's a big thing, is you actually have to get into motion, right? The word emotion is basically energy in motion. So people are sitting down like, oh God, this is the worst thing ever. Why is this happening to me? But they're still sitting down. They're still sedentary. So you actually have to do what peak performers do. And you have to get in motion. You have to actually do something. That's why the holistic life mastery puzzle is absolutely essential, is that we have the nutrition piece dialed in. You're fueling yourself with life force containing substances that enhance your life force. Your fitness is the movement, the mobility, the actual training grounds for your physical frame and your mind. And then there is the psychological development, we just talked about that, and then the entrepreneurial development, which is a different subject. But it's putting all those pieces together, and once you have the thought patterns and the behavior meeting up, then what happens is you actually believe the story you're telling yourself. Right? Because peak performers, make no mistake, peak performers weren't born that way. The best performers in the world oftentimes were not childhood prodigies. A lot of times childhood prodigies never make the cut because their paradigm or their self-worth or their identity becomes devalidated somewhere later in their life. They were so good when they were younger, it's almost like everything was handed to them. And then once they got older and could no longer meet that same level of validation, everything broke. Okay, it's really important to understand that you don't have to start the best in the game, but you do have to start in order to become the best in the game. You have to get started, and we tell ourselves these little lies, or I don't want to say lies, but we tell ourselves these things to pump ourselves up. But if you're only talking to yourself, if you're only having internal dialogue, but you're not actually moving, you don't actually have physical rituals in your life that line up with the new psychology that you're developing, you're not really going to believe it. It's gonna be incongruent. So those two things have to meet up together, and one day you no longer are just telling yourself a story. It actually becomes an embodiment that you hold in your physiology, your physical state. You start to walk more upright. You start to carry yourself as that vision that you once held. You basically become the person that you may never thought you could be, but because you're moving forward and you have the idea of becoming a peak performer, one day you will become that very same